There is a quiet tragedy unfolding, one so insidious that most never notice it. Not in the headlines, not in the breaking news, but in the way you hesitate before speaking, in the way you shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. It is there in the subtle flinch when you see your reflection, in the restless hunger to be more, do more, prove more. It is the constant, gnawing suspicion that no matter how much you achieve, how much you change, how much you try, you will never be enough. But here's the paradox. Who told you this, and why did you believe them? You were not born with this doubt. No infant enters the world questioning their worth. No child, left untouched by external judgment, looks at their body with shame or wonders if they deserve to exist. These thoughts were woven into the very fabric of your identity before you even knew they were there. Where did it begin? Maybe it was when you were praised not for who you were, but for how well you performed. When love became something to earn, not something given freely. Maybe it was when you first saw beauty measured in inches and pounds, success defined by wealth and status, intelligence reduced to test scores. Maybe it was in the way the world rewarded those who conformed and punished those who didn't. And so, without realizing it, you learned. You learned to see yourself through the eyes of others. You learned that self-worth was conditional, that happiness was always just one achievement away, that if you could just be smarter, richer, thinner, stronger than, you'd finally be at peace. But peace never came, did it? Because the finish line keeps moving. The standards keep shifting. No matter how much you change, there is always something else to fix, some new flaw to correct, some new ideal to chase. And that is not an accident. This is not just a personal struggle. It is a design, a system, a carefully constructed illusion that ensures you remain forever in pursuit, forever dissatisfied, forever doubting. But for what purpose? Who benefits from a world where self-hatred is the default? And more importantly, how to break free? There is a machine. It does not have a face, nor a name, nor a single creator. It has existed for centuries, shaping the way you think, the way you feel, the way you see yourself. You were not meant to notice it. In fact, its greatest trick was making you believe it never existed at all. This machine has many architects, philosophers, psychologists, institutions, corporations. But its purpose is singular: to turn human beings into obedient, self-doubting, easily controlled entities. And its primary method? Teaching you to hate yourself. Carl Jung once wrote about the persona, the mask we wear to conform to society. From the moment you were born, you were given this mask. It started simply: be a good child, follow the rules, get good grades, make your parents proud. But over time, the demands grew sharper, more insidious. Be attractive, but not too vain. Be successful, but not arrogant. Be confident, but never too bold. And so you learn to split yourself in two: the person you truly are and the person you were told to be. The more you sacrificed authenticity for approval, the further you drifted from yourself. Self-hatred was not the disease, it was the symptom. Friedrich Nietzsche saw this deception for what it was. He called it slave moralitia, set of values imposed by the powerful to keep the masses weak and obedient. Religion, culture, and social norms taught you that self-denial was virtuous, that suffering was noble, that humility was the price of acceptance. Meanwhile, those who ruled politicians, corporations, the elite lived by an entirely different code. While you questioned your worth, they thrived on your insecurity. Arthur Schopenhauer took it further. He believed human suffering was inevitable, but society had made it worse by selling us an illusion of happiness, one that was always just out of reach. The more you chased it, the more you suffered. Capitalism perfected this strategy. If you feel incomplete, you will spend your entire life buying things to fill the void. And when that fails, you will blame yourself. Aldous Huxley, in Brave New World, predicted a world where people wouldn't need to be forced into submission, they would willingly accept it. How? By being conditioned to love their own oppression. by being bombarded with distractions, entertainment, trivial pleasures. A world where people were so busy seeking validation that they never realized they were in chains. And then there was Jean-Paul Sartre, who spoke of the look, the way society forces you to see yourself through the judgment of others. From childhood, you were taught that your value depends on external validation. Your worth became something to be measured, graded, ranked. You did not exist for yourself, but for the expectations imposed upon you. Is it any wonder, then, that self-love feels like rebellion? You were trained by systems, by institutions, by invisible forces to be dissatisfied with yourself. A content person does not seek approval. A self-assured person does not obey blindly. A person who loves themselves is a person who cannot be controlled. But if this system is so deeply embedded, how do you escape it? Or, more disturbingly, what happens if you don't? There is a reason you feel exhausted, even when you've done nothing wrong. A reason why, no matter how much you accomplish, there's always a lingering sense of inadequacy. The weight you carry isn't just personal, it is systemic, generational, and deliberately placed upon you. And yet, you blame yourself. This is the cruel genius of modern society. It convinces you that your suffering is your own fault. You feel anxious, depressed, unfulfilled. Society tells you the problem isn't the world you live in, it's you. You aren't meditating enough. You aren't grateful enough. You need to wake up earlier, work harder, think more positively. And so, you try. You download self-help apps, read productivity hacks, optimize every aspect of your life. But no matter what you do, the void remains. Because the truth is, the system was never designed for your happiness. It was designed for your obedience. And the cost of that obedience is far greater than you realize. From the moment you learned self-doubt, you became your own worst enemy. Your mind turned into a battlefield perfectionism, warring against self-acceptance, fear, silencing desire, guilt, punishing ambition. You learned to mistrust yourself, to second-guess your instincts, to suppress the parts of you that didn't fit the mold. Carl Jung called this the shadow self, the parts of you that society deemed unacceptable, forced into the unconscious. The more you repressed them, the more they controlled you. You see it in the way you sabotage opportunities, reject compliments, and cling to relationships that reinforce your worst fears. The world may have planted the seed of self-hatred, but you were taught to water it. Once you believe you are broken, you become desperate for anything that promises to fix you. And that is exactly what corporations, institutions, and industries thrive on. Beauty companies profit from your insecurities. The pharmaceutical industry profits from your anxiety. Social media profits from your craving for validation. Even the self-help industries, despite its promises, often reinforces the idea that you were never quite enough. You were trained to be a consumer of self-worth rather than its creator. To always look outward toward products, approval, achievement, rather than inward. Because if you ever truly accepted yourself, the entire system would collapse. Here lies the cruelest consequence of all. The fear of being yourself. After years of molding yourself to fit expectations, the idea of breaking free feels terrifying. What if people reject you? What if you fail? What if, without the masks and performances, you are nothing? Jean-Paul Sartre described this as bad faith, the way people deceive themselves to avoid the burden of true freedom. It is easier to follow the script society gave you than to write your own. Because freedom means responsibility. It means no longer having anyone to blame. It means standing in the terrifying, exhilarating truth that you alone define your worth. And that is exactly why they don't want you to realize it. Because a person who accepts themselves cannot be manipulated. A person who loves themselves cannot be controlled. A person who knows themselves is the greatest threat to a society built on insecurity. So the real question is not, how do I fix myself? It is, who benefits from me believing it to be fixed? And once you see the answer, once you truly see it, there is no going back. If the world profits from your self-doubt, then to love yourself is an act of rebellion. But rebellion is not easy. It demands that you unlearn the very things that have shaped your identity. It requires you to dismantle the invisible framework that has dictated your worth since childhood. It forces you to ask the question that terrifies society the most. What if I stop playing this game? What if you stopped measuring your value by your productivity? What if you stopped seeking approval from people who do not even know themselves? What if you no longer needed to be fixed? Because you were never broken to begin with. To break free, you must be willing to do what most people never will. You must be willing to see the illusion for what it is. You were taught that perfection is the goal. That if you could just become the right weight, the right level of success, the right kind of attractive, then you would finally be happy. But perfection is a moving target. No matter how close you get, the standard shifts again. The pursuit of perfection is not a journey toward fulfillment, is a manufactured prison. Carl Jung argued that real growth comes not from erasing flaws, but from integrating them. Wholeness, he said, is embracing the shadow, the messy, imperfect human parts of yourself that society told you to hide. The goal is not to be flawless. The goal is to be real. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote about the will to power, the idea that true strength comes from defining your own values, rather than accepting those imposed on you. Most people live by second-hand beliefs absorbed from culture, family, media, without ever questioning where those beliefs come from. But what if you rewrote the script? What if your worth was not something to prove, but something inherent? What if your existence was already enough? The world has conditioned you to seek validation externally, but the only way out is to turn inward. This is why meditation, solitude, and deep introspection are so powerful. When you sit in silence, when you remove the noise of expectations, you start to hear a different voice, your own. There is a reason society fears authenticity. A person who accepts themselves is uncontrollable. When you embrace who you truly are without apology, without performance, you disrupt the system. You become immune to the tactics that keep others trapped. You no longer buy into trends that exist to make you feel inadequate. You stop shrinking to fit into spaces that were never meant for you. Jean-Paul Sartre wrote that the greatest form of existential freedom is to choose yourself. Not the version of you that society prefers, not the mask you wear for approval, but the raw, unfiltered, unedited truth of who you are. It will be uncomfortable. Some people will not understand. The system will try to pull you back in. But once you begin to see through the illusion, you can never fully return to it. And that is how the rebellion begins. Not with protests, not with destruction, but with something far more dangerous, a person who refuses to hate themselves. There comes a moment, sudden, irreversible, when you realize that everything they told you about yourself was a lie. The moment you see it, you cannot unsee it. The weight you have carried for years, the guilt, the self-doubt, the belief that you are not enough, it was never yours to bear. It was placed upon you, deliberately, systematically, by a world that profits from your insecurity. And now, you stand at the edge of something terrifying and exhilarating: freedom. They told you that you needed to improve, that you needed to change, to become more, to become something else. But what if the truth is that you were never broken in the first place? Arthur Schopenhauer believed that suffering was inherent to human life, but much of what we call suffering today is manufactured misery. The system teaches you to doubt yourself, to fear failure, to see imperfection as weakness, because a person who believes they are flawed will always seek external solutions. But what happens if you reject that premise? What if you accept yourself not as a project to be perfected, but as a human being worthy of love, exactly as you are? You were trained to seek validation, to crave approval, to measure your worth through achievement. You were conditioned to chase an ever-moving goalpost, believing that happiness was just one more milestone away. But what if you stop running? Aldous Huxley warned that modern society would not control people through force, but through distraction, through endless entertainment, consumerism, and trivial pleasures. The system does not need you to be imprisoned in chains. It only needs you to doubt yourself enough to remain obedient. But the moment you realize that the prison door was never locked, you stop playing the game. You stop needing to prove yourself to a world that thrives on your insecurity. You stop living for external approval and start living on your own terms. Nietzsche called it the revaluation of all values, the moment when you stop accepting society's definitions of worth and create your own. The moment when you reclaim authority over your mind, your choices, your identity. This is the ultimate truth. You were always free. The chains were psychological. The limits were illusions. The self-hatred was implanted, not inherent. And now, you have a choice. You can return to the comfort of the old beliefs, shrink yourself to fit within the system, and continue playing the role assigned to you. Or you can step into something terrifyingly real, yourself, unfiltered and untamed. This is not an easy path. The world does not reward those who break free, resists them, ridicules them, tries to pull them back into the fold. But the difference now is this: you see the game for what it is. And once you see it, you can never be controlled again.